supports the U.S. military. And there are also engineering consulting services that are set up in Puerto Rico to provide services to the U.S. Department of Defense. Now, that would not have been possible if they were not in Puerto Rico or any of the 50 states in U.S. jurisdiction. Because of the rules and regulations, they require U.S. citizens as a matter of homeland security to provide this service. One of the, I don't want to mention names, but for example, in the last 4 or 5 years ago, a company from India that provides engineering services collaborated with a company in Puerto Rico to provide engineering consulting services to the U.S. Department of Defense and other federal agencies. And they were able to establish in Puerto Rico and provide this service. This is something that would not have been possible without them being in there. And this is actually a great success story because, frankly, at the beginning, this company didn't know how it would work out. So it started out with a small 30 to 50 person operation, okay? But right now it is over 800. It has over 800 personnel. Okay? It sort of worked for them, and they continue to expand on that front.
We've also had a pharmaceutical from China that was looking at our facilities for the FDA certified manufacturing plant. And one of the reasons that they wanted to manufacture in Puerto Rico was not to send to the U.S., but to have...
I'm okay.
but
it looks like a wall, but it's not. I think it's the window up there. Yeah.
but to have those pharmaceutical products sent back to China with the label of made in the U.S., and that gave them a lot more ability to enter that market with more safety features that the consumer market in China were requiring that from that medical pharmaceutical.
May I ask what kind of export of the pharmaceutical products includes patients of tonnage out of
Puerto Rico? I don't know.
In terms of tonnage?
Or in terms of
value.
Yeah, the value.
Well, in terms of value, our export is 60 billion. And I would say 24% of that 6 billion are pharmaceuticals.
So a lot of pills.
Huh?
A lot of pills.
A lot of pills, yes. And these are, most are branded pharmaceutical products. I mean, these are the Pfizers, the Eminence, the Humira, and Abbott, and very high margin products.
So I presume they are distributed all over the world.
Yes. Now, if you look at the trade statistics, they don't necessarily show that they're, because sometimes they are sent to, back to U.S. distribution centers, so it will be recorded as going back to the U.S., and then it gets distributed all over the world. But a related point to what Eugenio was saying here is that recently we've seen interest from Chinese pharmaceutical companies looking at some of the facilities in Puerto Rico for the following reasons. Some of the facilities are being vacated because, if you're familiar with the U.S. branded pharmaceutical market, you know that there is a patent expiration cliff that is occurring. And so some of the branded pharmaceuticals are reducing their operations. However, their facilities are not only FDA approved, they are approved for sale in many, many countries in the world. EU, in Latin America, in Japan, and probably in Singapore as well. And so, this is something that's very attractive for someone who's coming in and wanting all of those certifications that are already ready to go.
So most of these products are sent to the States.
Or sent
Not
to-
all of them,
Or sent
but
to Singapore too. If you
That's
look
right.
at, if you look at our bilateral trade between Puerto Rico and Singapore, you think that we're doing a lot of business, but a lot of it is the chemicals and pharmaceuticals that are sent directly from Puerto Rico to Singapore.
I guess what I was referring to is they're not necessarily sent directly to their country of destination. So if you look at the trade statistics, I think it would, represent the amount of goods that are actually produced in Puerto Rico and ended up in, other parts of the world.
One question. We have 3.9 million people, and Singapore now 5 million people. Already we complain about the labour are expensive. So with 3.9 million people, how is the cost of labour compared to US or even in Singapore?
Lower than Singapore, and much lower than Singapore and lower than the U.S. But we are regimented by the minimum wage of the U.S.
It's the federal law, the minimum wage is $7.25 an hour applies. However, if you're looking at minimum wage jobs, you're looking at engineers and, software developers. Those typically have about a 20 to 40% wage gap with the continental U.S. And partially that's because of the size and the number of, I think, job opportunities in Puerto Rico. It is more geographically, isolated from the mainland.
So an engineer could, let's say, could earn starting at $30,000 US. Maybe with more experience could go up to $45,000. Just throw an anecdote here. But you would be able to find a very comparable, very well-trained engineer that could come in already trained almost in some of these sectors and provide you very good services. So this is from anecdotal conversations with other engineers that I hear, but you'll find a whole gamut of well-trained individuals that are not who would want to stay in Puerto Rico closer to family as opposed to go to mainland U.S. for a job that would take them further away from their home.
Culturally, Puerto Rico has very tight family unity, so a lot of times they would prefer to take a lower wage by staying in Puerto Rico. But also don't take our word for it. I think on the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, you'll be able to compare the wage levels by industry of Puerto Rico versus the 50 states. Average wage per hour.
Basically, labor is one method. On the other method, how about if the materials itself, the steel materials?
The materials, the raw materials. Well, it depends on what you will be manufacturing.
Is it abundant there compared to the U.S.?
Compared to the U.S., well, it depends. Certain minerals, it's just not, it's not there, and they have to be imported. But there is a supply chain for some products, in particular in life sciences, because these are this is the industry that's been there and strong, for over 50 years. And so some of the supply chain base have been developed over time. But if you're looking at certain minerals and raw materials, yes, those would have to get imported. But what usually happens, because of the tax advantages, what usually happens is that companies bring the higher value added portion of the production process to be done in Puerto Rico. Because that's the part that gets the benefit of the lower tax
So
rate.
the abundance of engineers where something like design engineers, research engineers, is it availability there much easier?
Much easier than where?
The engineers, the experienced engineers. Because we recently established a manufacturing plant in Delaware, registered there. And we
In where, I'm sorry?
Delaware.
In Delaware,
yeah.
okay.
And we have our registered manufacturing factory in Boston itself. Okay. which the thing we launched in this June. We'll do in June. It's, so we was wondering, because we saw the cost of over the hit cost for the next 18 months is quite high for us over there. So in other words, if we can convince our partners over there to relocate certain things to Puerto Rico, we would like to see what's the difference over there.
I see.
Yes.
Well, you're welcome to have you or your partners over there to send us the profile of the type of talents that you're looking for.
Engineers.
Huh?
Engineers.
Mostly engineers.
Just general, but within engineering,
More on
is there
the
any
software-
electrical
software
or software
design and
engineering
Yeah, a
and
mix of
design?
them.
And, we could